1933. Extraordinary time and the suppression of freedom of speech. The decline of the workers and peasants, as already noted. During the development of the Manchu events, there was an aggravation of the contradictions of Japanese capitalism and a deepening crisis in agriculture, which caused all the contradictions of Japanese imperialism. The struggle of the workers was unfolding. The peasant movement began to be characterized by an aggravation of rental conflicts. It is noteworthy that the unorganized workers of small and medium enterprises are drawn into the strike movement, as well as the involvement of not only poor peasants, but also middle peasants in the struggle for land. This struggle took place under the slogan "Earth or Death." In addition, as a result of the Manchu conflict, the anti-war movement quickly expanded, the participants of which were guided by the principle 286 of turning the imperialist war into a civil war. The development of aggression in Manchuria, as noted above, led to a military inflationary situation and an increase in the profits of capitalists. But at the same time it seemed that there was a certain increase in wages and the resorption of unemployment. In fact, if there was a known increase in nominal wages, it did not keep up with the increase in prices. Moreover, the working day lengthened, real wages decreased, and the provision of unemployed jobs was often only temporary. But be that as it may, the apparent increase in wages and a decrease in unemployment have led to the fact that unorganized workers began to have illusions about improving their situation. In addition, repression by the authorities and fluctuations in the reformist trade union leadership intensified. Because of this, after 1932 the wave of the labor movement began to subside gradually, that is, the number of labor conflicts and the number of their participants began to decrease gradually, with the exception of 1937. After 1933, 287, the percentage of organized workers began to fall rapidly. But, on the other hand, a severe depression was observed in agriculture, which found its striking expression in a large crop failure in Tohoku in 1934. This depression, which was the flip side of the military inflationary conjuncture, gave rise to profound consequences. During the period from 1932 to 1935, the movement of tenants grew steadily. This applies both to the number of rental conflicts and to the number of participants in them. In the struggle for state rights, the National Peasant Congress Seino Zenkoku Keiki, under the leadership of the Communist Party, organized poor peasants who did not have their own rice. This movement merged with the struggle for rice waged in the cities of the Japanese Cooperative League Nihon Sakumiye Ramai. For a certain period this movement went along an ascending line. Facts were revealed when the government created huge stocks of rice. In addition, the essence of capitalist dumping was exposed during the movement. However, the retreat of the labor movement hindered the development of the peasant struggle. Although the number of rental conflicts increased, but the average number of their participants gradually decreased and soon the movement was reduced only to separate dispersed speeches. Right-wing groups seeking to use the anti-capitalist mood of the peasantry came up with the reactionary slogan "Village First." Representatives of the nationalist movement explained the landowners' struggle for land with the results of land hunger and demanded its elimination by expanding external expansion. This movement, which included in its ranks all sections of the rural population, from landowners to middle peasants, gradually turned the Japanese village into a base of fascism. One of the reasons for the decline in the workers' and peasants' movement was the fluctuations and split of the country's progressive political forces. The open transition of the Socialist Mass Party to the side of fascism was evidenced by the incident with the brochure The Importance of State Defense and the Need to Strengthen It, published in 1934. The party's General Secretary, Aso, said that under Japanese conditions, social reforms aimed at the abolition of capitalism and the rational merging of the army and the proletariat are quite logical, and openly supported the fascist ideas of the military. But the socialists claimed that trade unions should in every way avoid strikes. Gritting their teeth, they must endure a reduction in wages, and having succeeded in firing 20 workers instead of 30, patiently enduring all the suffering 75. They talked about serving the motherland through production in conditions of extraordinary time and about industrial patriotism. Under their leadership, the Japan Federation of Labor retreated even further, becoming a class harmony and became almost a government trade union organization. Federation of Japanese Trade Unions, Nihon Rado Kumonsurinkai, League of Navy Workers, Kaigan Rado Ramai, Patriotic Union of Tokyo Tram Workers, Todi Nekoku Domei, Union of Telecommunications Employees, Takesinjugwan Domei, 289, and other organizations together with those born at that time one after the other, right-wing state unions that upheld the principles of Japanese nationalism supported the turn of the proletarian parties to the right. After the withdrawal of the left wing from it in 1931, the All-Japanese Peasant Union, which was the main organization of the peasant movement, sharply straightened. The left wing formed the National Peasant Congress, and after the 7th Congress, in 1934, this union almost completely ceased its activity. The repressions of the authorities intensified. White terror was unleashed. Under the pretext of extraordinary time, participants in the workers' and peasants' movement and those who did not agree with government policies or did not show a patriotic spirit were declared rebels, illegally arrested and tortured. The victims of this terror were Iwata Yoshimichi, Kobayashi Takechi and others. A wave of arrests paralyzed the activities of the central organ of the Communist Party. Then it attacked the organizations of the ILO, the Union of Communist Youth, the Congress of Japanese Trade Unions, the National Peasant Congress, the League of Japanese Proletarian Culture and other cultural organizations. But the most serious blow to the Japanese Communist Party was the betrayal of Sano Manabu and Nobama Sadatika. Treason. Sano and Nobama. In June 1933, Sano and Nobama, who were in prison, made a statement during the parsing of their case by the court, entitled Letter to Like-Minded Defendants. The text of their statement read, "The Japanese Communist Party is following the instructions of the Comintern, it only looks outwardly revolutionary. The advancement of a virtually harmful slogan on the abolition of the monarchical system is fundamentally wrong." Further in their statement, Sano and Nobama insisted on the need for a break with the Comintern. 290. This betrayal meant nothing more than a surrender to fascism, a rejection of the principles of internationalism in the revolutionary movement, a rejection of the class struggle, a fascist appeal for the so-called unity of the nation, and, finally, a rejection of the struggle against the imperial system. According to Sano, the incentive that prompted me to become a supporter of new views was the military situation that developed after the Manchu incident. 76. Sano, an intellectual by birth, and Nabama, a native of the workers, were among the leaders of the Communist Party, so their betrayal dealt a serious blow to the progressive forces of society. Mitamura Shiro, Takahashi Sadaki, Nakao, and then Kazama Jokichi also announced their transition. The so-called era of transitions began. According to an investigation conducted by the Criminal Department of the Ministry of Justice, a month after the statement, Sano and Nabama left the progressive movement or changed him. 415 out of 370 people under investigation and 133 out of 393 convicted on the basis of the law on maintaining public peace. Numerous cases of withdrawal from the movement were explained by the instability of people who did not endure cruel torture and prolonged imprisonment. For weak-willed people, successes such as health status, a sense of duty to the family, the severity of life, etc. In the same direction, there was a theory about the awakening of the self-consciousness of the Japanese nation as a result of the war and about the historicity of the imperial house. It should be added that the criminal department determined the measure of punishment for the defendants depending on whether they retreated from their beliefs or remained faithful to them. Thus, all types and degrees of betrayal have merged together, from conscious betrayal to forced retreat from practical activity. So, Ph.D. Kawakami Hajime, not daring to open betrayal, is forced that the criminal department determined the measure of punishment for the defendants depending on whether they retreated from their beliefs or remained faithful to them. Thus, all types and degrees of betrayal have merged together, from conscious betrayal to forced retreat from practical activity. So, Ph.D. Kawakami Hajime, not daring to open betrayal, is forced that the criminal department determined the measure of punishment for the defendants depending on whether they retreated from their beliefs or remained faithful to them. Thus, all types and degrees of betrayal have merged together, from conscious betrayal to forced retreat from practical activity. So, Ph.D. Kawakami Hajime, not daring to open betrayal, is forced. 291 was to declare his resignation from the front of the class struggle and the cessation of practical activity. The Kawaka statement was a blow to many people, convincing them that the retreat of those who could not go for open treason is inevitable. In this respect, it played a negative role. Thus, the anti-fascist movement in that period was defeated, not only as a result of external blows, but also due to the expansion in the ranks of its participants. From the All Japan Association of Proletarian Art to the League of Japanese Proletarian Culture, such transitions were raised on the billboard and journalistic circles of figures of proletarian literature. The impression was that a retreat and confusion had begun among the entire intelligentsia. Before considering this phenomenon, let us analyze the course of development of proletarian literature after the creation of the All Japan Association of Proletarian Art, abbreviated as NAP, or Zenaikan Mused Gijutsuremi, which was organized immediately after the incident on March 15, 1928. The association, which announced that it considers it its duty to bear the pro-poor art, has created its own Senki print organ battle banner on the basis of the magazines Proletarian Gijutsu, Proletarian Art, and Zenie, Vanguard. At the same time, she published her views in the field of theory and creative methods. This organization consisted of 6 departments: literature, theater, art, music, film and publishing. However, In December of the same year, it was reorganized into the All-Japan Council of Organizations of Proletarian Culture (ZIN), Nihon Muzanetsuki Jitsudan Kyogai Kai Sinapu for short, and already at the beginning of the next year its departments were transformed into the Union of Japanese Proletarian Writers Nihon Proletarian Sakadomei, abbreviated as NARUPU, Union of Proletarian Theaters of Japan Nihon Proletarian 292 Keikyohomi, abbreviated as Puroto, the Union of Japanese Proletarian Artists Nihon Proletarian Bijutsukohomei, the Union of Japanese Proletarian Musicians Nihon Proletarian Ongakudomei, and the Union of Japanese Proletarian Cinema Nihon Purorishiaria. These unions, which aimed at Bolshevization of art and defended the theory of the creative method of dialectical materialism, opposed the literary front of the Workers' and Peasants' League of Artists Ronigi Jitsukarama, leaning towards social democratic ideology. In August 1930, at the Fifth Congress of the Profintern in Moscow, theses on the role and tasks of proletarian cultures and educational organizations were adopted. Representative of Japan Kurahara Kurihito, who was present at the Congress, returned to his homeland in March 1931 and published in the journal Gyujutsuron Theory of Art an article entitled Questions of the Organization of Proletarian Art, in which he noted that in the face of fascism, the activities of the former All-Japanese Association of Proletarian Art was apolitical in nature, was imbued with the spirit of cultural tribulation, and therefore the association was powerless in the fight against fascism. These provisions of Kurahara formed the basis of the principles of proletarian culture. Already in April 1931, in his article New Tasks for Members of the All-Japan Association of Proletarian Art, Kurahara called on artists included in the association, decisively break with the social democratic views and take the side of communism. And in September 1931, in another article Impressions of the Method of Art, he urged artists to not address topics that are far from the demands of the proletariat and its party. Thus, the movement of proletarian culture was one of the links in the Communist Front. In July-August 1931, to the alliances into which the association was divided, the Scientific Proletarian Union, Proletariat Kagakukenkudomei, and the Proletarian Union of Esperanto were added. In addition, an initiative council for the organization of a central council was created. And in September 1931, in another article Impressions of the Method of Art, he urged artists to not address topics that are far from the demands of the proletariat and its party. Thus, the movement of proletarian culture was one of the links in the Communist Front. In July-August 1931, to the alliances into which the association was divided, the Scientific Proletarian Union, Proletariat Kagakukenkudomei, and the Proletarian Union of Esperanto were added. In addition, an initiative council for the organization of a central council was created. And in September 1931, in another article Impressions of the Method of Art, he urged artists to not address topics that are far from the demands of the proletariat and its party. Thus, the movement of proletarian culture was one of the links in the Communist Front. In July-August 1931, to the alliances into which the association was divided, the Scientific Proletarian Union, Proletariat Kagakukenkudomei, and the Proletarian Union of Esperanto were added. In addition, an initiative council for the organization of a central council was created. The Scientific Proletarian Union, Proletariat Kagakukenkudomei, and the Proletarian Union of Esperanto were added. In addition, an initiative council for the organization of a central council was created. The Scientific Proletarian Union, Proletariat Kagakukenkudomei, and the Proletarian Union of Esperanto were added. In addition, an initiative council for the organization of a central council was created. 293. The League of Proletarian Culture, which in December, immediately after the dissolution of the All-Japan Association of Proletarian Art, created the League of Japanese Proletarian Culture, Nihon Purotaria Bunkaramai, abbreviated Kappa, and began to publish the journal Purotaria Bunka, Proletarian Culture. The Initiative Council began to act as an advisory body, which was the center for coordinating the actions of all organizations of the proletarian movement in the field of culture. His program was published: 1. To fight the bourgeois, fascist and social fascist reaction in the field of culture. 2. To carry out systematic political and economic education of workers, peasants and other workers. 3. Satisfy the cultural and other needs of workers, peasants and all workers. 4. To achieve the realization of their goals by strengthening the proletarian culture, which stands on the positions of Marxism-Leninism. While the League of Japanese Proletarian Culture relentlessly implemented this program, the government in March 1932 began to apply widespread repression. A leading group of 400 people, including Kurahara, was captured and thrown into prison. Nakano, Kubikawa and others. But Miyamoto Kenji and Kobayashi Takiji, having gone underground, continued to lead the League. However, the reaction steadily suppressed all newly created organizations. The deterioration of the law on maintaining public peace made the fight even more difficult. Over the next 3 years, all activities of the Proletarian Cultural Front virtually died, although there was no formal prohibition of this activity. Anti-war artwork. The All-Japan Association of Proletarian Art and the League of Japanese Proletarian Culture waged an anti-fascist and anti-war 294 struggle on the cultural front under conditions of brutal repression. We have already talked about the 1928 anti-militarist collection War to War, compiled by an association of left-wing writers, which helped rally Japanese writers to create the All-Japan Association of Proletarian Art. In 1929, Karashima Denji wrote on anti-war literature 77, in which he clearly showed the historical and class significance of anti-war proletarian literature. Many anti-war and anti-militaristic works have appeared. At Yuriichi, who exposed the true state of affairs in the Japanese army, in addition to the notes of a soldier on the earthquake, published in the collection War of War, wrote a series of stories, The Death of a Soldier Taught You, Those Left Behind, and others. Taiteno Nobuyuki, the author of The Disease of the Army, Sankey, May 1928, published short stories, Man Becomes a Target, Rainfall, Red Sky, and several others. Kobe Oitoakaji, who was brutally murdered in a police dungeon in Tsukiji in 1933, painted a picture of the life of enslaved fishing workers in his crab poem, April-May 1929. Exposing the predatory aggressive actions of imperialist Japan in the territorial waters of other states. The works of Kuroshimadan Gilialia and Maruzia, 1926, Snow Siberia Sled A Flock of Alarmed Birds, 1927, Glacier, 1928, Rana Kuramoto, 1929, and others showed the true face of the Japanese army. These stories were created based on the personal impressions of the author, who was called up by the rank and file in the army during the Siberian expedition, together with his book Armed Streets, which depicts the Jingun incident. They are deeply moving works that give rise to hatred for a meaningless war. These stories were created based on the personal impressions of the author, called up by the rank and file in the army during the Siberian expedition, together with his book Armed Streets, which depicts the Jingun incident. They are deeply moving works that give rise to hatred for a meaningless war. These stories were created based on the personal impressions of the author, called up by the rank and file in the army during the Siberian expedition, together with his book Armed Streets, which depicts the Jingun incident. They are deeply moving works that give rise to hatred for a meaningless war. Along with Kuroshima's article on anti-war literature, a major achievement in the theory of anti-war literature was Kobayashi Takeji's article War 295 and Literature, published in the Asahi newspaper in 1932. But at the same time, there was a clear gap between the anti-war works and numerous verses, on the one hand, and the governing theory, on the other. In the context of the ongoing repressions carried out on a large scale in connection with the Manchu incident, this gap was one of the main reasons that prompted writers to abandon decisive anti-war statements and go only to the fight against the reactionary nature of bourgeois literature. Activities in other areas of culture also developed around the front of the All-Japan Association of Proletarian Art. In 1928, the Vanguard Theater Zenitsu, later called the Zengikizo, which belonged to the Workers' and Peasants' League of Artists, merged with the Proletarian Geikikan Theater, which broke with the Japanese Proletarian Geikikizo Theater associated with art. Thanks to this merger, a single front of the All-Japan League of Proletarian Art was created, which had its own theater, Seiyaku Heikikyo. The theater opened its first season with plays Still a Slave by Murayama Tomoyoshi and The Tempest by Kaji Iwataru, staged in Tsukiji. In September 1928, this theater staged the performances The Mountain, Armenton, The Father, Hisaitai, and other plays in honor of the 3-year anniversary of the newspaper Musen's Yoshimbun in the Hatakoto Hall. During this period, the theater widely practiced touring in the province. During the reorganization of the All-Japanese Association of Proletarian Art in February 1929, the proletarian troops Proletarian Geikitten, the basis of which was the Seiyaku Geikikyo Theater, thanks to the inclusion of a number of troops, they created an all-Japanese theater organization, the Union of Proletarian Theaters of Japan. At the Constituent Assembly of the Union, the program of its activity was clearly defined. Through the theater, 296 work in the masses, carried out in the form of large performances of mobile theaters and literary reading, to defend the workers and peasants of the Soviet state and wage a decisive struggle against the imperialist war. In 1929, the Seiyaku Heikikyo Theater staged in Ueno the performances of Roaring Waves and Footless Martin in May 1st, and in June and July staged Murayama Tomoyoshi's play Behind the Front, directed by Sano Seiki, which had a large success. This greatly strengthened his authority. Therefore, in October, on the initiative of 3 theatrical groups Kokoroja, Geikitsukiji Kajakikiyo and Shintsukiji Geikiden. A new theater association was created, Shinko Geikiden Kyogaikai. The results of the creative community of theaters were not slow to effect. So, after that, the Union of the Japanese Proletarian Theater organized an extensive tour of mobile theaters throughout the country. On stage were The Gang and Victory Chronicle by Murayama Tomoyoshi, Street Without the Sun by Tokunaga Sunao, The Absent Landlord Kobayashi Takiji, and other performances, but in an increasingly worsening situation. The anti-war orientation of the performances gradually dulled. After the dissolution of the Seiakuheikiyo Theater in 1934, the anti-war activities of the Union almost completely ceased. An exception was the staging by the new troupe of Kubosuke in extremely difficult conditions of fascist domination of the play Volcanic Lan, June 1938. In this play, revolutionary propaganda continued to sound, albeit muffled. As for cinematography, in this area of culture in 1929 the Union of Japanese Proletarian Cinema was created, which had a wide network of film movements, but all this could not be called an epical anti-war activity in the field of cinema. Should be turn 297 attention that cinema workers, mainly under the influence of the Seiakuheikiyo Theater, created a number of anti-war films in 1929 to 1930. Living Puppets, directed by Utada Tomu, City Symphony, directed by Mizoguchi Kenji, and What Made Her Do It, directed by Suzuki Jukichi. Of course, these directors held the positions of bourgeois reformism, and the anti-war character of their films was weakly expressed. The Japanese were greatly impressed by the strictly censored viewing of the Soviet film Storm in Asia, descendant of Genghis Khan, Turksib and others. And what about fine art? The program of the Union of Japanese Proletarian Artists, created in February 1929, spoke of the tasks of combating reactionary art and the use of painting as a weapon in the liberation struggle of the proletariat. The Union has developed vigorous activity throughout the country. Traveling exhibitions of paintings were created, a gallery of proletarian painting was opened. Cartoons were placed in the newspapers Musen's Yoshimbun and Seiki, a collection of proletarian caricatures was published, as well as a collection of posters, and an exhibition of proletarian posters with statistical tables was opened. A large number of anti-war, anti-militarist paintings were also shown. Thus, Yanagi's Masamu was close and understandable to the workers and peasants, who posted many cartoons in the Musen's Yoshimbun newspaper. Many brilliant anti-war and anti-militaristic cartoons belong to his brush, from which even today it glows with the spirit of the relentless class struggle against the forces of imperialism. Of particular interest are his works recruiting for the army, Rado Shimbun, No. 65, January 1927, the Conference on Arms Reduction, held under the slogan World Peace, Ibid. No. 71, February 1927, What do the workers and peasants support, and what does the Japanese Empire of Capitalists strive for? Ibid. No. 77, April 1927, Here it is, The Politics of the Military. Ibid. No. 88, June 1927, A Ghost Wanders, The Universe in Darkness. Ibid. No. 116. October 298, 1927, and overthrow the terror. Ibid. No. 142, March 1928. Such anti-war cartoons, exposing the aggressive plans of the Japanese military in the language of artistic images, were outstanding works that called for the fight against militarism. Here is a description of several anti-war posters. One of them shows a worker busy with work. Then he passes a commission for recruitment into the army. Next to a portrait of a worker who has become a soldier. Further, a picture of military maneuvers appears in front of the viewer. Below the signature, on the day of 12 Sen, and so 2 years. Finally, demobilization, and formal soldiers find themselves unemployed. Or another poster, including a series of drawings, the peasant is working on the field. A recruiting station where peasant youths are driven to undergo military training. Portrait of an old peasant woman lost in thought. The woman is crying. Signature below. They took a son what to do. Portrait of a peasant soldier. A bag symbolizing military spending, where the money collected from the peasants in the form of taxes is poured. Signed below, taxes have increased even more. And here is the third anti-war poster. There are soldiers on the boat which the bourgeoisie sends to the front. Below is a laconic signature, war. The signature under the picture depicting soldiers who have become cannon fodder reads, "They are at war with the Chinese brothers, with the workers and peasants of Russia." Next, in front of the viewer's eyes, there are rows of graves in the caption, "This is why workers must fight against the imperialist war." The poster ends with a picture showing the figures of a worker and a peasant standing on defeated cannons, their hands entwined in a firm handshake. By such means, through installation, Yanagi's created a whole series of anti-war drawings, leading the audience to the idea of the need for active action by the masses. Next, in front of the viewer's eyes, there are rows of graves in the caption, "This is why workers must fight against the imperialist war." The poster ends with a picture showing the figures of a worker and a peasant standing on defeated cannons, their hands entwined in a firm handshake. By such means, through installation, Yanagi's created a whole series of anti-war drawings, leading the audience to the idea of the need for active action by the masses. Next, in front of the viewer's eyes, there are rows of graves in the caption, "This is why workers must fight against the imperialist war." The poster ends with a picture showing the figures of a worker and a peasant standing on defeated cannons, their hands entwined in a firm handshake. By such means, through installation, Yanagi's created a whole series of anti-war drawings, leading the audience to the idea of the need for active action by the masses. However, these proletarian paintings, which are outstanding anti-war and anti-militaristic works, contributed little to the strengthening of realism. On the contrary, they observed formalistic tendencies. The retreat of the movement for the development of proletarian culture. Despite such striking successes of the movement for the development of proletarian culture, it had many weaknesses. Guiding theoretical views overly limited writers to urgent political issues. For example, there was a tendency to reduce creativity only to the circle of political issues posed by the party. The organization of the movement itself also had significant shortcomings. It turned out to be a very strange picture, The energy of artists and masters who entered into various associations due to the money meetings and small daily work was spent on other purposes and very little on direct creativity. 78. The weakness of the movement was also the lack of clarity on the specific application of the creative method in political practice. And when the government's repressions fell upon the cultural movement, this, along with writers' hesitations from the petty bourgeoisie and the intelligentsia, led not only to a massive departure from mechanical politicking, but also to its flip side, apoliticality. This explains the emergence of the so-called transitional literature. Hayashi Fusao, who broke with the front of proletarian art, published the book Youth in 1933. The inherent uncertainty of the class point of view in his other work, Mature Age, 1936, developed into a worship of militarism. Hayashi argued that Ito Hirobumi 79 and his absolutist government were spokesmen for political freedom in Japan. However, many works of literature were characterized by greater sincerity than Hayashi books. So, for example, Takami-jun, bowing 300 in his work The Past Must Be Forgotten to Decadence, expressed in him an aversion to himself, for he sought to find ways that would help him avoid a complete moral decline. The works of Shimaki Kansaku Blind and Leprosy were a reflection of the spirit of the era of decline at that time. During the period of mass betrayals transitions, he painted solid characters who rejected treason and even remained in prison until the end. His heroes, who were on the verge of despair because of their physical weakness, blindness or a serious illness, leprosy, still survived thanks to their philosophical outlook on life. White Knights by Murayama Tomoyoshi 1934 was a work that described the political defeat of proletarian riders. The hero of this work is drawn truthfully, with all the human flaws. The works of Nakano Oijikaru House in the Village 1935 and Novelist Not Writing Novels 1936 are an open confession of wounded hearts during the offensive. The hero of the first of them, Kanji, to his father's words, "If you want to save your life, quit writing," he replies, "I understand this well, but still I will write." The author had a good intention to soften, as much as possible, at least by the most insignificant activity, remorse, and tried to provide at least some resistance. In this case, the transition was not perceived as a shameful betrayal and moral decay. Therefore, the Nakano book found a wide response in the hearts of many cultural and honest people. "If you want to save your life, stop writing," he replies, "I understand this well, but still I will write." The author had a good intention to soften, as much as possible, at least by the most insignificant activity, remorse, and tried to provide at least some resistance. In this case, the transition was not perceived as a shameful betrayal and moral decay. Therefore, the Nakano book found a wide response in the hearts of many cultural and honest people. "If you want to save your life, stop writing," he replies, "I understand this well, but still I will write." The author had a good intention to soften, as much as possible, at least by the most insignificant activity, remorse, and tried to provide at least some resistance. In this case, the transition was not perceived as a shameful betrayal and moral decay. Therefore, the Nakano book found a wide response in the hearts of many cultural and honest people. Takakawa incident: the defeat of the communist movement, which is the vanguard of the anti-fascist struggle, led to the defeat of the socialist and liberal movements. The incident with Takikawa at Kyoto University sounded the death knell of freedom. Members of the nationalist organization Union of True Japanese, Henry Nahasya Dojo, Minoda Munaki, Mitsui Kin and others, 301 people from the right wing of the supporters of the theory of the divine origin of the emperor, have long begun to shout about the Red Professor at the university. These so-called Red Professors were Minobu Tatsukichi, Makino Weiichi, and Suihiro Atsutaro at Tokyo University and Takikawa Coulson at Kyoto University. The first victim was Takikawa. Takikawa's theory of criminal law contained the following red ideas: since the crime was generated by the poor organization of the state, therefore, it must result in a condemnation of the state. The issue of Takikawa was raised at the 64th session of Parliament, and then Minister of Education Hatoyama Itairo demanded his resignation. The meeting of professors of the Faculty of Law of Kyoto University opposed the measures of the ministry, considering that the latter violates the rights of university self-government and poses a threat to free science. Students also supported professors by organizing a protest movement. Then the government took extraordinary measures. By the decision of the Committee of Senior Officials of the Ministry of Culture, it removed Takikawa from office. In response, 39 professors, associate professors, teachers and assistants to the Faculty of Law collectively resigned, and the Faculty of Law of Kyoto University actually closed. The result was a split among the university's professors. 8 professors Sasaki Soichi, Miyamoto Hideo, Tsukawa Hiroshi, Tsunedo Yasusa and others left the university. The rest again started to work and reinstated the law faculty, but it was no longer able to become a center of science again and turned into a powerless and dead organization. The incident with Takikawa was perceived as an encroachment on university self-government and freedom of thought, and therefore caused wide resonance and sympathy from public opinion. However, professors of other universities, although they condemned the government's repression in words, still did not dare to organize collective resistance. Students raised the protest movement throughout the country, 302, but they also failed to combine it with the struggle of workers and citizens for their vital interests. Even among Marxists there were figures who limited themselves to formal and essentially indifferent criticism, stating that bourgeois liberalism had exhausted itself and that this phenomenon was historically natural. 2 years later, in connection with the discussion of the issue on the essence of imperial power, the second victim of repression was Dr. S.C. Minobu. Endless fascist violence took place. The labels of rebellious and harmful were groundlessly pasted to purely academic teachings. The intelligentsia did not repulse the reaction during the Takikawa affair, and in this atmosphere of conciliation and silence it inevitably failed. Fascisation of education. At the same time that the Takikawa case was fabricated, public attention was drawn to the incident of red teachers in elementary schools. The repressions of the emergency time fell especially cruelly on the figures of enlightenment. Immediately after the events of March 15, student research societies of social sciences and the Student Joint Committee were dissolved. Persecution of student self-government bodies intensified. In addition, in accordance with the course on the eradication of left-wing professors from Tokyo University Omori Yoshitaro, professors from Kyoto University Kawakami Hajime, and professors from Kyushu Island, Sasahiro, Ishihama, Tomoyuki, and Tsukisakatsuro, were fired. In October, the government created a student department at the Bureau of Special Education, under the control of which students and rectors of universities and other higher educational institutions were put. Actively monitored the ideology of students and teachers. The following year, the Social Affairs Bureau was created, the task of which was to educate and train 303 in the spirit of the ruling circles, pleasing to the working youth, not covered by schooling. The Bureau was set a goal to carry out universal cultural mobilization. In July 1931, the committee was established to investigate the ideology of students, and in August 1932, the Institute of Spiritual Culture of the Japanese people was created in Tokyo. Control over thoughts was carried out very consistently. In 1933, the Bureau for Ideology was created. In 1935, youth schools. Several 100,000 young men and women educated in the spirit of national unity graduated from these schools annually. In addition, students of these schools received military training. This was nothing more than a combination of former additional vocational schools with youth military circles. Therefore, the requirements of the military, striving to prepare militarily future soldiers, agreed with the course of the Ministry of Education to provide students with preliminary training. The government then assigned the Education Reform Council the task of conducting educational reform and cleaning up the research and teaching staff of educational institutions. In its introductory part, the report of the Council read, "Our education system has roots in the national state system and is imbued with the Japanese spirit. Developing on this basis, education should contribute to the growth of civilization, the progress of society, and contribute in every way to the prosperity of the continuously existing imperial house." This was followed by a report on the reorganization of the education system made on the basis of this report. In October 1936, a committee was established to improve the quality of education. In November, the first meeting of the committee took place, at which it was decided to pursue a decisive course towards the education of imperial ideology.